Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. As you're coming in to the event here, go over to the chat and chat to everyone and tell us where you're joining us from and how many students you have watching with you.
Wisconsin. Hello, Wisconsin.
Alan, make sure you chat to everyone.
Oh, did I just do it to you?
Yep.
There you go. Thanks. I see Ohio, Chicago, Illinois, Rochester, Texas, Atlanta, Missouri.
Students.
Going fast, but I'm checking it out. A lot of Texas. Hello, Texas. Louisville, Colorado. Hello. Nebraska City, Nebraska. Bradenton, Florida. I've been to spring training baseball down there. Jonesboro, Georgia. Lexington, Tennessee. Pennsylvania, more Georgia. Spokane. Hello. Early morning for you as well. Texas, New York. Indiana, Kentucky. I saw North Carolina go by. Hello, my old stomping ground. New Hampshire. Love it. Key Peninsula. Beautiful. Kansas. I'm going to be in Kansas in October to get a Kansas State Book Award.
Tell us how many students are watching with you so we can get a sense of how many people are here joining us live.
Sarasota, a lot more Wisconsin. I love it. Colorado, we got a big Colorado contingent here. San Antonio, one of my best friend from high school still lives in San Antonio. Iowa, hello. Superior, Colorado. How great is it to be able to say you live in Superior, Colorado? St. John's, North Glen, hello. Oakland, California, West Coast represent. Pennsylvania again, hello you guys. New Jersey, excited, me too. I don't know where Challenger Middle is in North Carolina, that's cool, if I've said it right. Austin, like Austin a lot. Grimes, Iowa, hello. I love seeing where everybody's from, that's awesome. We're still letting people come into the room, so we'll be getting started soon, but you guys are in the right spot. Mankato, Minnesota, that's cool.
Mackin.
Columbus, Ohio, yeah, I've been there a lot. Texas, more Texas, another Minnesota. Or Virginia, okay, I think that's our first Virginia, at least the first one I've seen go by. Thank you, you like my Captain America shield? It's real metal. My family got it for me as a present when I got to write a Captain America book. If you haven't read it, I wrote a book called Captain America, The Ghost Army. It's a graphic novel, I think you'll love it. I should bring that over. I won't go pick it up right now, but it comes off and you can wear it. It's pretty awesome. San Diego, Mobile. Yeah, and you see my Winnie the Pooh. That's my Winnie the Pooh from when I was a kid. Now he's looking a little cooler with his 3D glasses on. Can't get rid of my bear from when I was a kid. El Paso, I love El Paso, been there a lot of times. Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, I hope I'm saying that right, that's cool. Crystal City likes my headphones, thank you. They're having a lot of trouble connecting on Bluetooth. If you can help me out with some tech, that'd be really helpful. But I like how old school they look. Redwood Shores, California, I love it. McNabb, Illinois. St. Louis, been there a lot too. Hello, Missouri. Orrington, Maine. I'm catching some of these as they go by. Home of the Chiefs. I watched that game the other night. Chiefs looking good. I got to drive when I was in Kansas City. I got to drive by Arrowhead, or whatever they call it now, GEHA Field, and it was pretty cool. And I got to see a game at. I got to see a Royals game while I was in town. It was a different season. It wasn't football season. Hello. All right, Rome, New York. Thank you for being fans. Downers Grove, Illinois. Isn't that where? Isn't Downers Grove where War of the Worlds happened? You guys can tell me. I think so. Where it's supposed to have happened. Elgin, Illinois, I see. Amherst Middle School, Erie, Colorado. Maybe it was Downers Grove, New Jersey, where it happened, not Downers Grove, Illinois. I'll have to look that up later. War of the Worlds, I thought, happened in Downers Grove. Durham, all right, good to see you guys. Peachtree City. Everything's named Peachtree in Georgia.
All right.
Got more Columbus. Yeah. Well, we're hit 11. I know we could keep going. I love just giving shout outs the whole time, but
thank you everyone for telling us where you're coming from in the chat. It was really fun to see everyone. Tell us how many students you're joining with. So happy you're all here. My name is Kaya Heisey. I am from Mackin. We put on Storyteller Spotlight. We're so lucky to have Alan Gratz here with us today to do a little Storyteller Spotlight. He's going to talk a little bit about his new book, and then we're going to get to the Q&A. So before we get started, our special thanks to Scholastic for making this happen. If you take a picture of your students watching today, you can put it on Instagram and tag us, or put it on X and tag us. Next week, we're having one for slightly younger students. Lauren Long is going to be on Storyteller Spotlight, so send this to your teacher friends to get them signed up. When we get to the Q&A part, we're going to use the Q&A function instead of the chat. So everybody find the Q&A function, find the button, and you'll be able to put your question in there. And last but not least, let's introduce Alan. Alan Gratz is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 20 novels and graphic novels for young readers, including Heroes, 2 Degrees, Captain America, The Ghost Army, Ground Zero, Refugee, Allies, Prisoner B3087, and Ban This Book. A Knoxville, Tennessee native, Alan is now a full-time writer living in Portland with his family. We are so excited to have you here, Alan. I'm going to hand it over to you.
all right, cool. Thank you guys. Thanks everybody for being here with us. I'm going to give a really short presentation, and then we'll get to your questions because I know that everybody's excited to do that. But I am going to share my my screen here. So I'm the author of all these books and more, as Kaya said, and I'm going to talk to you about one of them specifically this morning, or this afternoon, I guess, wherever you're coming in from. But first, I want to tell you a little bit more about me as a kid. So I was born into a really athletic family. My dad played football for the Air Force when he was stationed in Germany, and was the high school football coach at my high school for like 20 years. And my uncle, he played football for the University of Tennessee. So when I was born, my family expected me to grow up and be a big time athlete. They thought if my dad and my uncle played college ball that I would too, maybe even go pro at something. But very quickly, we all discovered that I am really terrible at sports. I love watching sports. I love reading about sports. I love writing about sports. I love playing sports, but I am really, really terrible. And so very quickly, we realized that this was not going to be my future. Thankfully, my parents pulled me aside at a young age and they said, "Hey, Alan, it's okay if you're not great at sports. You know what? You find whatever it is that you love to do, and you go be the best at that." And what I really loved was writing. This is one of the very first books that I ever wrote. It was called The Mummy and the Vampire, and I wrote it and illustrated it in 2nd grade. Are you guys seeing the big screen? I should have asked you, Kaya. Can you guys see everything okay? I know I'm pulling you back off of
I
your
can
muted.
see it.
It's all good. All right, great. I just wanted to make sure. When I was in third grade, I started writing a newspaper for my street. It was called the Blue Spring Lane News, which I typed up on my granddad's old typewriter. I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but it says edited by Alan Gratz, but I didn't edit it particularly well because I misspelled the word edited. But that's okay because I was learning to write and learning to type and getting better at both. In fifth grade, I wrote my very first book, and it was called Real Kids Don't Eat Spinach. I carried it around on a clipboard all through fifth grade, adding chapters to it, and it never got published or anything, but it was my first taste of writing a longer book, and by then I knew that's what I wanted to grow up and do. Now I have published 20 books, way too many to talk about in detail today, so I'm going to focus on the one that came out this year in February, which is Heroes, as we said at the outset. Okay, so Heroes is a story of the attack on Pearl Harbor. My story starts the day before Pearl Harbor with Frank McCoy, who moved to Hawaii earlier that year with his family because his dad is a Navy pilot in the U.S. Pacific Fleet. And Frank is a little awkward in his own skin. He just grew like 12 inches over one summer. And now at 13, he is taller than his mom. He's like one of the Charles Atlas ads that he sees in the back of the comic books that he loves so much. Go from chump to champ in just 3 months when you subscribe to my weight training program. So he moves in next door to another boy his age named Stanley Summers. And when the two discover their shared love of comic books, they become instant best friends. Frank and Stanley even start working on a comic book of their own, starring a superhero they create called the Arsenal of Democracy. Now, Stanley was born and raised in Hawaii, but his dad is also a Navy airman. That's why Frank and Stanley both live on Ford Island, that island right there in the middle of the map. It's an island right in the middle of Pearl Harbor. And this is where Navy scout planes would take off, and planes from Navy aircraft carriers would come in for repairs, and all the ships would dock around it. And this is where they live. Frank and Stanley live on a row of houses right along Battleship Row, where the Navy parks all of its big battleships. So life is pretty good for Frank and Stanley until one day when they're coming home from baseball practice and Stanley gets into a fight with some bullies. It's the perfect time for him to step up and use his newfound strength to fight for his friend, but he doesn't. Even worse, Frank runs away. Running away from the fight drives a wedge between Frank and Stanley, and Frank wants to explain. He has a good reason for being afraid of getting hurt, but he can't find a way to tell Stanley. Not until the next day when the two have been invited to go on a tour of the USS Utah, the ship you can see here, with a sailor who's dating Frank's older sister, Jenny. Frank apologizes and he starts to explain, but he never gets a chance to finish because suddenly Frank and Stanley and everybody else at Pearl Harbor have a lot bigger things to worry about. Wave after wave of Japanese airplanes come flying in from all directions, attacking the naval air station at Pearl Harbor. They shoot up airfields, they attack parked planes, they dive bomb the battleships, and they torpedo cruisers and destroyers. The sneak attack comes as a total surprise to American sailors, many of whom were still asleep or enjoying a day off. Slowly, sporadically, the U.S. ships and planes started to return fire, but they did little damage to the Japanese forces. Frank and Stanley, they're caught right in the middle of it. So they're on the Utah, which is up on the northwestern part of the island on what's called Carrier Row, where they would usually park aircraft carriers. But that day, all the aircraft carriers were out at sea, and they had parked some old battleships there. So the Utah is there, and one torpedo hits the Utah, boom, and then another, boom, and the Utah, it starts to roll over. Now Frank and Stanley have to climb the deck of a tilting battleship and swim for Ford Island, but they're not safe yet. The Utah, like I said, was up there along Carrier Row, and now they have to get across the airfield to get back to their houses over on Battleship Row. But right now, the airfield is being dive bombed by shooting planes. So they finally do get home, and when they get there, their houses are right next to all those battleships, which are also a focus of the attack. And Frank and Stanley arrive right in time to get knocked on their butts by the explosion of the USS Arizona, a huge explosion. And there's even more danger to come as Frank and Stanley make a harrowing trip across Pearl Harbor in an open boat during the second wave of the attack. And it sounds like I just told you the entire story, but I didn't. There is so much more that happens to Frank and Stanley in Heroes, but you have to read the book to find out what happens next. Ha ha ha, that's my teaser for it. So I'm going to stop sharing and come back here, and I'll invite Kaya to come back here, and I would love to get to your questions about Heroes, about writing, about any of my other books. Just try to remember to not be too spoilery in case other people in the audience haven't finished the same book that you have. All right.
Okay,
so
here is
yeah,
our first question
let's
from
do it.
7th grade ELA class in Wentzville, Missouri. How do you come up with your ideas for your books?
Sure. So how do I come up with ideas for books? So I get ideas from all over the place. Sometimes it is a person I met, like with Prisoner B3087. Jack was a real person, and I got to talk to him to help tell his story. So, like with Grenade, I met a person who was a kid on the island of Okinawa during that battle, the Battle of Okinawa. And he told me his story, and I used that as the beginning of my story in Grenade. So sometimes it's a person I met. Sometimes it's an anniversary. I wrote Ground Zero to come out on the 20-year anniversary of 9/11. I wrote Allies to come out on the 75th anniversary of D-Day. And so sometimes I'm looking at that kind of thing. And other times it's something that you guys ask for. I now have a lot of readers, and you have a lot of things you're interested in. And so a lot of people say, will you write a book about this or write a book about this? And I had a lot of requests for a book about Pearl Harbor, and I was interested to find out more about it. And that's why Heroes came out this year, because you guys have been clamoring for a book about Pearl Harbor. So sometimes it's whatever, but every time it's something that I'm really interested in, though. I want to make sure that I'm always writing about something that I want to dive into the research and learn more about. But I get them from all over the place.
A question from Ellis. What was your inspiration for Refugee specifically?
Sure. So when I wrote Refugee, I had been thinking about one particular story to start, and that was the story of the MS St. Louis. So for you guys who aren't very familiar with Refugee, one of the 3 stories in it is about a group of Jewish refugees who leave Germany in the 1930s on board a ship called the MS St. Louis, trying to escape Hitler and the Nazis right before World War II breaks out. And they're turned away from Cuba, they're turned away from the United States, they're turned away from Canada, and where they're going to end up is this big question. And I was going to write a book that was just about that ship and the refugees on that ship. And while I was working on that book, my family and I took a vacation down to Florida, and we got up one morning to go for a walk on the beach, and we found a raft on the beach that someone had used to come to the United States. To this day, I don't know who was on it. It was the raft was empty when we found it. I don't know if they made it here safely or not. I hope they did, but I've never known. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, why am I writing a book about refugees 75 years ago when I could be writing about refugees right here, right now? You know, people who were here last night, like 100 yards away from where I was sleeping. Why am I not telling that story? And at the same time I was having all of those thoughts, I was watching on the news all the images of the Syrian civil war and the Syrian refugee crisis. And I was like, oh my gosh, why am I not telling that story? And then one day while all these thoughts were kicking around, I was like, wait, why do I have to write 3 different books if I wanted to write all these stories? What if I wrote one book and I put all 3 stories in it? And that's where the idea for Refugee came from. It started with the St. Louis, and it was built upon by my own experiences seeing refugee rafts in Florida and watching on the news everything that was happening in the present day in the Middle East. And I thought, I gotta find a way to tell stories of the refugee, of what it's like to be a refugee, not just one particular time and place, but all through human history. That's where that one came from.
Out of all the books you've written, what book would you want to be in or live through?
Oh, wow. Gosh, that's a fun one. I write about a lot of dangerous stuff, so I don't know if I want to be in any of my books. That's rough. I'm writing a book right now about a heist, a group of people trying to rob a bank at the 1936 Berlin Olympics. And I think that would have been an incredible time to visit and watch, because this is, of course, the Olympics where Jesse Owens won like 4 gold medals and was breaking records, and really putting paid to this idea of Aryan supremacy that the Nazis were trying to convince the world of. Like it would have been an incredible time. And the Boys in the Boat story happened there, and there were all kinds of other amazing stories at that Olympics. That one would be cool to visit and see. So that's a little bit of a cheat because I'm working on that book now and it's not out. But I'd certainly love to be in a Marvel story like Captain America if I had superpowers. I don't know if I'd want to be in it if I didn't, because usually the people without superpowers are running for the nearest Starbucks when the villains and the heroes are fighting.
Can you make a movie out of the book Heroes?
Right. Oh, gosh. So I get asked a lot of times, where's a movie of your books? And the number one thing I have to say is it's not up to me. So movies cost millions of dollars. I don't have millions of dollars. They take an army of people, like thousands of people, to make a movie, and I don't have 1,000 people. And I'm no movie director. I love to write, and I think I could write a script, but I couldn't make the movie. So it takes somebody from Hollywood finding your book and saying, hey, can we make a movie out of this? And as soon as I get that call, I'll be like, yes, please. But it's not up to me. I've come close to having people have been interested. Mila Kunis called me during COVID. Like, I got on a phone call with her to talk about Ban This Book as a possible movie. She and her production company were interested. That was pretty cool to talk to her. It never happened. And Refugee, there was a production company that did The Hate You Give and Love, Simon and Fault in Our Stars, and they were interested in turning Refugee into a film. And they got as far as writing a script for it, but then COVID hit and everything shut down, and all the momentum got lost. My hope is that will come back at some point and happen. I don't know. I have to just keep waiting and hoping. I know we have people on this call from all over the place. If any of you have parents in the film industry, call me. It would be awesome. Because I would love to see a film made out of my books as well as you guys. So if it was up to me, they would all be movies, but it's not up to me. So no plans for a Heroes movie right now, but gosh, I hope sometime in the future that happens. That would be cool. Can
you tell us a little bit about Ban This Book?
Sure. So for you guys who don't know, Ban This Book is the story of a girl in 4th grade named Amy Ann Ollinger who goes to a school where a parent starts challenging and banning books. That means taking books off the library shelf and taking them away so that nobody can read them. And one of the books that gets taken off the shelf is Amy Ann's favorite book from the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basiley Frankweiler, a real book. And she gets so upset that she starts trying to fight back against the book bans. And one of the ways that she does that is she and her friends try to collect all the books that have been banned and hide them in a locker and check them out to kids in secret as a banned book locker library. And they get into a little bit of trouble for that. And what happens with that, you'll have to read the rest of the story. That book came out the same year that Refugee did, I think 2017. So it's been 7 years now. And when I wrote that book, like, books were being challenged and banned in the United States, just like always, but it was kind of under the radar. But right now we are going through a time when it is not under the radar. It is a huge problem right now. We're going through an epidemic of book banning, and it's really important to fight for the freedom to read. It's really important that we not let one person or one small group of people tell us what we can and can't read. Like, nobody has the right to tell you what you can and can't read except your parents. And that means that they can tell you what you can't read, but they can't tell everybody else's kids what they can and can't read. And we have to stand up for the freedom to read and fight for that. I'm working with a group of authors now in a group called Authors Against Book Bans, where we're fighting back against that and doing what we can. Next week is Banned Books Week. And I encourage you to go into your library and find a book that has traditionally been banned and give it a read and stand up for the freedom to read like Amy Ann and her friends. So the book came out 7 years ago, and it's a little different landscape now, but the message remains the same. Nobody should have the right to tell you what you can and can't read, except your parents. I'm sorry, they're still the boss of you.
A 7th grade class in Louisiana asked, what is your process when you start writing?
Sure. So most of my books are historical. So the number one thing I do is I start doing research. I go to the library, I check out a big stack of books, I bring them back here to my office, and I sit and read books for a few months, sometimes like 3, 4, 5, 6 months, depending on the size of the project. 2 degrees took me a long time because not only was I reading about different places and people, but I was also reading about science behind climate change. So sometimes it's a very specific day, like Pearl Harbor. The attack on Pearl Harbor took place over like 2 hours. So there's a lot to learn, but it's a really finite time. Sometimes though, a book like about climate change is like, oh my gosh, I could be reading about this for the rest of my life. But I do research until I feel like I have enough scenes to make a story. And then I stop and I have a big board where I pin up story ideas on an outline. And I write down all my story ideas on note cards and I pin those up on the board trying to figure out my story. And sometimes there's big gaps in the story and I have to go back to research to find out answers for those gaps. But once I figure out the whole start to add in all the research notes that I need to tell that story. So once I have that outline fixed up, then I start to write. And that whole researching and outlining process can sometimes take me like 9 months to get to, or well, let's say 7 months to get to that part, 7 or 8 months. And then it takes me a whole other month, but just 1 month to write my first draft. Why? Because I did all that work on the front end to get ready to write. That's why I can write a book in like a month. So then I write the book and then I'm done. Woo! Not quite. But then I turn it into my editor and she reads it and then she writes me back an edit letter and she says, Alan, this is the best book you've ever written. Now here's everything that's wrong with it. And I have to go back and fix all that stuff. And I turn in that draft and then she gives me another letter that says, you fixed all that stuff, that's great. And here's all the new stuff that's wrong with it. And I have to go back and fix that. And this part of the process, the revision part, usually takes me like a full year. So from beginning to finish of a book, it usually takes me about 1 year and 9 months, sometimes 2 years before a book comes out. The book I'm writing right now about the Berlin Olympics of 1936, which will come out next fall, sometime around this time, a year from now, I've already written the first draft and I'm working on the second draft. So I'm working that far out on a book that you guys won't be able to read until next year. But that's the way it works. It takes a long time to write the books. But I love it. I love researching the books. I love outlining the books. I love writing the first draft. I don't love revision as much. That's my least favorite part of the process. But I do it because I know that my books will become 1,000 times better by the end by doing it. But that's kind of a crash course on what I do right from the start and all the way to the end of a writing process.
Can you tell us about how you got to write a Captain America book?
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. So I've been a comic book fan for a long time. You can see I've got like my Cap shield. I've got some Batman and Robin stuff back on the wall and a few other things. A bunch of heroes that I like. So I've read comics books since I was a kid. And then I saw Scholastic and Marvel were doing middle grade superhero graphic novels. And I called up my editor and was like, how do I get in on this? And she said, well, what's your idea? Who would you want to write for? I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many heroes. Now they were doing stuff like Miles Morales and Ms. Marvel and Shuri from Black Panther. So they were doing younger characters. And I was like, well, I can't do like Iron Man as a kid because he wasn't Iron Man until he was an adult, that kind of thing. But then I thought, well, Captain America is like a teenager when he gets the super soldier serum. And he's fighting in World War II. And in the comics, Bucky Barnes is even younger than he is. And he's not a superhero, but he's there with Cap in World War II. And so I was like, and I'm already writing a lot about World War II. What if I pitched them a story about Cap and Bucky fighting Nazis in World War II? And boom, Scholastic loved it and Marvel loved it. And the next thing I knew, I was writing a Captain America graphic novel. And I just had a blast. Marvel was great to work with. They were like, throw in anything from the comics you want. I couldn't borrow from the movies, I could only borrow from the comics. But that was cool because I'd been reading comics all my life. So all those months of research I do on other books, I'd already been doing years of research kind of by reading Marvel comics all my life. So I had a ton of fun. I'd love to write more. I don't know if there's going to be another one on the horizon, but I am doing more graphic novels. We've got a graphic novel of Refugee coming out, I think next year. I've written it and the art's being done, so that takes a long time. So it's always tricky to know when it's going to come out because the art, you just have to give time for the art to be drawn. And I've also got an original graphic novel that I've written about a bear that fought in World War II. It's based on a true story. So I don't have a date for that one yet, but Soldier Bear, sometime in the future, I hope you'll be able to read that too.
TS Middle School asked, what made you start writing books about war?
Oh, that's a good question, because at the beginning of my career, I wrote other stuff. I wrote fantasy novels, I wrote mystery novels, I wrote some contemporary stuff. And I had done some history, but I hadn't written about war in particular. And then I met Jack Gruner. I was introduced to Jack Gruner, and Scholastic said, this guy has an incredible story. He survived 10 different Nazi concentration camps during World War II. Do you want to help him write his story? You write historical stuff, but you've never written about the Holocaust or World War II. Do you want to help him do his story? I was like, oh my gosh, yes, it was incredible. And I got to work with him and tell his story. And I thought when I did that, that was it. I was like, I wrote a book with Jack. It's about the Holocaust and World War II. In fact, the next book that I wrote was Code of Honor, which is a contemporary spy story, like set in the present day in the United States. I didn't plan to go back to World War II right away. But while I was writing Code of Honor, so Prisoner comes out and I'm writing Code of Honor. And I told you it takes like 2 years to write a book. So I'm working on this book. This other book comes out and I start getting fan mail about Prisoner, more fan mail than I'd ever gotten about any of my other books. And the number one thing that everybody said was, what are you going to write more books about World War II? And I was like, okay, I hear you. Let me finish Code of Honor, and I promise I'll get right back to it. And so right after that, I wrote Project 1065, which is about a kid who's a spy in the Hitler Youth. And I wrote Refugee, which has a World War II connection because of the St. Louis. And I've gone back to, like, I've gone away from World War II every now and then, but I've got Grenade, which is about the Battle of Okinawa. I've got Allies, which is about D-Day. I've got Heroes, which is about Pearl Harbor. So I even though I've written about 9/11, even though I've written about climate change, and those are more recent things, and I will continue to do other points of history or the present, I keep coming back to World War II because I love reading about it and writing about it, and you guys, you eat it up. So as long as you guys keep reading it, I'll keep writing it.
When you were young in middle school or high school, what were your favorite things to read?
Oh yeah. So, okay, first of all, I have to confess, I wasn't a huge reader. I did read, but I was playing video games and I was role playing. I was making up stories with my friends and I was writing stories. I would go out when I was a little kid, I would go out in the woods and build forts and make stuff up. And I had a whole bunch of action figures, which I still have in different part of the house from when I was a kid. And I would make up stories with those. So I was often doing stuff with stories, but I wasn't always reading, but I did read. A big book for me when I was a kid was Tuck Everlasting. I read that in 7th grade and it had a huge impact on me because it's about life and death, but it was written for kids and it treated me very seriously as a young reader. And I've always tried to remember that and treat you guys, my young readers, seriously, like not treat you like kids, but like the thinking human beings that you are, which I was back then. I liked, when I was much younger, the Phantom Toll Booth by Norton Juster because I liked all the wordplay in it. I read The Hobbit, I think when I was in 4th grade. I was too young. I didn't get all of it, but I really enjoy that book still and have reread that a bunch of times. My parents were big on getting me to read classics. In fact, they never took me to a comic book store and they discouraged me from reading comics, which is why when I got to college, all I did was go to the comic book store and buy comic books. So they should have learned a lesson. If you keep a kid from something, they're going to just throw themselves into it later on. So I became a big comic reader when I was in college because I could finally drive and get to them myself. I'm trying to think what was a big deal for me. Those are a few that I that I remember being a big fan of when I was younger. And like I said, I did read, but if you're not a huge reader out there, then you're like me. It took a really exciting book to make me sit down and read, and that's okay. Just keep looking for those books that you really, really love. Don't give up on reading, please, because it's awesome. But look for the right book for you. Maybe you just haven't found the right book, and your librarian or teacher can really help find that for you.
Okay, here's our last question.
Okay.
What do you like best about writing?
Oh, I think what I like best about writing is I love learning new things, and I love diving into a time in history or a place, even in the present day, and learning something new and learning enough about it to write a book and then moving on. Like, I could not teach a college class on World War II because I don't know everything about World War II. I couldn't teach a college class on climate change because I don't know everything about climate change. But I learned enough about those topics, for example, to write my books about those topics. So I get to dive in, learn new stuff and exciting stuff, write a book about it, and then move on to something else. So for somebody like me who loves to just constantly learn new things, but never like make any of them my life's work, writing books is amazing because I get to jump around from topic to topic. It's one of the reasons I don't write as many series. I love jumping from new topic to new topic all the time. And if you're like me, like books can do that for you, like standalone books, or becoming a writer and getting to learn all these new things and be different people and see different worlds. That's a ton of fun.
Okay, everyone, time to go over to the chat and thank Alan for joining us today. Anything you write to him there, I will share with him, so he'll get the full chat and all of your questions. And then Alan, in the last minute here, is there anything you want to say to the students that watch today?
Sure. I hope that you guys have a great rest of the school year, and I hope that you will keep reading. And I hope if you haven't, you'll pick up Heroes and read it. One of the big messages of that book is kind of the same as, to get back to some comic book stuff, as Spider-Man, that with great power comes great responsibility. And I hope that you will remember that whatever power you have in this world, in life, that you will use it to help other people in need. I think that's one of the greatest things we can do as human beings, is to look out for each other. And I hope that Heroes has that message, and I hope that you guys will live that message as well in your lives.
All right, well, this was so fun. Thank you, everyone, for putting your questions in. There were obviously thousands of them. I could only ask a few, but you guys are awesome. You're so good at this. Come back next time and ask some more questions to our authors. And have a great day. Bye.
Thanks to Mackin. Thank you guys for being here.